All right, so today's class is called The 4 Decisions That Will Shape the Next 4 Years of Your Business. So this class was born out of a common question that we're always asking ourselves at TAG, which is, we have all these members, and how come some members, we see performing really, really well, and we see other members that continue to be frustrated by some of the same problems that other members are succeeding with. So what we did here was we narrowed it down to 4 decisions that we have to make, and that's what we're going to go through today. Now, here's the thing about making decisions from a strategic level in our organization. Indecision. It's a lot of the time, it feels so much easier not to make a decision and to put it off. But I remember when I was first joining TAG and I used to work out of Dale Stein's office, I would hear him talk with members all the time. And members, what we want to do is we want to make sure we're leading our organizations in the right direction, we're making the best decisions possible, because not only is it going to affect our lives, but it's going to affect our employees' lives pretty drastically as well. And we want to make sure that we're making the right decisions. The problem with that is we lose way more money and frustration and effort and energy on indecision than we'll ever lose on making bad decisions. Because all a bad decision is just an opportunity for us to learn. And then if we make enough bad decisions, we learn a ton from that. And then what do you know, all of a sudden we start making great decisions. So one little note before we get into the meat of today's content is, I've been studying like neuroscience-based coaching for the past couple of years with TAG support. Moved up to San Francisco in order to be able to do that. And to summarize a whole bunch of years of research, I want to share this one little part with you. So basically, the way our brains work is safety first. So anytime we want to make a decision where we're going to experience something new, we've got this part of our brain called the ARC complex, and basically what it does is it shuts down our prefrontal cortex. So our ARC complex, that's all about keeping us safe. Our prefrontal cortex, that's about making the most intelligent, rational decision possible. So when we're making decisions, we have it hardwired into our brain to prefer indecision. So as an entrepreneur, you probably have faced this quite a bit, and you're very familiar with this. But this is one of the reasons why we end up in that space of indecision. It's because it's wired into us. So it's not our fault, but it is our responsibility as leaders of our organization to shift that. So let's go ahead and get to what are these 4 big decisions that we have to make. So it's not going to be a surprise, but these are all things we've probably heard a million times from everyone at TAG. So the 4 decisions we have to make are, am I going to be an early adopter when it comes to technology, or am I going to be a laggard for the next 4 years? Am I going to market to my customer base, or am I going to continue to ignore them? Am I going to make a plan for recurring revenue, or just continue hoping to somehow create recurring revenue? Am I going to be quick about management decisions with hiring and firing, or am I going to procrastinate? So what we did was, you've heard these things a million times from us at TAG, but what I wanted to do here is go through and share, basically mini case studies of other members of what they did to confront this decision and how they worked themselves through it. So the first one is, do I be an early adopter when it comes to technology, or am I going to be a laggard? Now, the members that we'd like to spotlight here are Steve Smith and Chad Tester from Dominion Voice and Data. Now, they have committed pretty firmly to always being an early adopter. And I remember when I was on the phone with them, I started asking them about this, and I said, how's everything going in your company? And what do you think is important about being an early adopter? And they said something really interesting. They said, if you're not willing to move forward and try, you'll fall out of touch very, very quickly with the market. At TAG, we've drawn this picture so many times. And if you've been to training, I'm sure you've seen it a million times, which is the adoption curve. So it talks about innovators, early adopters, early majority, the late majority, and laggards. And this little X, this is the sweet spot where we want to be. Where we want to be right there as one of those early adopters, because then we can benefit from all the opportunity that shows up as any technology moves through this curve. Now the thing is, this isn't exactly the most enjoyable place to be. This is a lot of times where we go and we talk with our other members. We say, what do you think about this new technology solution? And our members will, our peers will be saying, well, you know, I don't know, I think it has a lot of potential, but I'm just not sure about it yet. I'm gonna kind of wait and see how things pan out. You know, I think they've got a couple of their kinks and bugs they got to work out in their system. So let's, you know, I kind of want to wait and see it out. And then what happens is we wait for that technology to get to this point where it's so safe. And we go, okay, yeah, no, we look around and we see literally all of our other peers, everybody's doing it. And then that's the point where we go, okay, you know what, I'm in. There's not a huge risk here. Let's go ahead and adopt this technology. But the problem is we miss out on pretty much the entire curve. And then we get stuck in that spot and we're wondering, you know, what am I doing wrong? No, we're doing our best here to make sure that we're delivering the absolute best we possibly can to our customers. What are we doing wrong? Now, Dominion, they've committed to being in that early adopter position with all of their technologies. And some of the results they've gotten from that is they've grown 50% each year over the past 4 years. So I was pretty curious as to what their perspective was. So when I started talking with Steve and Chad, they said, you know, we came into the industry and we came from outside the industry. So we didn't really have any preconceptions about how it should work. And what they noticed was it was saturated with a bunch of companies, and the old way of doing business, you know, the good old boys network, they saw that was dead. They saw there was way too much competition coming in. So it forced them to figure out some kind of new solution. So they're sitting in this space and they're going, okay, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to move the company forward? And then they're sitting in a TAG training, and then they heard these words: he who owns the network owns the customer. And in that simple statement, they realized what their business model needed to be. So then they decided, okay, well, we need to own the network. We need to see that we need to deliver all of the different technology. And then they started making the transition to becoming a managed technology service provider way ahead of everyone. Now, there was definitely some obstacles that came up. So I asked them, you know, what are some obstacles that you face? What are some obstacles that you think other members might be facing when it comes to this? And the first thing they said is, you know, owners don't like to be wrong. And the inevitability is that some new technology, especially if we're catching it as an early adopter, it's going to fail. And if we're constantly staying at that leading edge for our customer, where we're always finding what is the new thing, what is the early adopter technology that we can bring to them, it's completely impossible to eliminate all the risk. And most of us are in business and have succeeded in business and, you know, survived for so long primarily because of one thing, and that's our reputation. And we've built that reputation over years and decades of making sure that we do the absolute best job we possibly can for the customer. But this is what makes Dominion different. They have a different perspective on their reputation. See, a lot of us have, we pride ourselves on having having put together really, really complicated solutions, have really, really successful installations and implementations and deployments of technology. And that's kind of how we built our reputation over the years, is we do such a good job on the service side that we're not willing to risk that. Now, Dominion has a different mindset when it comes to this. And their idea is, let's not let perfection be an enemy of execution. And we want to be first, not perfect. And like I said earlier, they know that if they're not failing every once in a while, they're convinced that they're not trying for their customer. And this is where it's really interesting around that reputation piece. One of the things that they believe is that if they're constantly withholding new technology and saying, oh no, you're fine with these other solutions that are a little bit older and a little bit outdated, but we've vetted them completely and we know it's going to be a perfect installation, we know that everything's going to work right out the gate, everything's going to be perfect. They consider that to be withholding new technology. And what that does is that actually tarnishes their reputation, and it kills the trust that they've been working so hard to build with customers over such a long period. And I asked them, how come you're able to pull this off? And they said, well, we win not because we're smarter than any of our fellow members. The reason we win with our customers is because we communicate better. Our customers know that we're not perfect. And that's kind of just one of the byproducts of staying in that spot on the adoption curve, of being an early adopter. They said, Zach, our customers know we're not perfect, and sometimes, we have mistakes, but they know that we're constantly coming up with what is the new thing, what's the latest technology that we can deploy, how can we be proactive with our customers, and even if we get something messed up on the implementation, our customer knows that we're going to come up with something else again and again and again to not only make up for that, but put them way ahead of all of their competitors. So what they've decided is they said, you know what? It's more important to us to be a trusted advisor that our customers can rely on instead of being perfect deployers of technology. Now, they were telling me this one story too about what this is like, and they talk about all the challenges that show up. And sometimes when they talk to their staff, the staff is like, oh, you guys put us in the deep end again. They got all the techs are a little grumpy, and it's like, okay, we got to deal with this. How are we going to make this work? How are we going to pull this off for the customer? And I asked them, what's some of the biggest opportunities that you see for other TAG members who know that they need to go in this direction, but what are the opportunities here? And then they told me a story of when they were at a customer awards dinner, and they were talking with a customer. There was like maybe 400 people there, and neither Steve nor Chad had spent very much time interacting with the customer personally. It wasn't someone that they were touching on a regular basis. It was basically handled by their staff. And as soon as they found out that these two were part of Dominion, people that they didn't even know were coming up to them and saying, oh, you're from Dominion? We love Dominion. And the opportunity here is it's about embracing change. Now, one thing that they do differently is not all of the technology decisions come from the top down. A lot of times what they do is they empower their techs to make decisions. They say, hey, if you're out and you're working on an implementation with a customer and you find other technology and you think that this is a better solution, we actually want to know about it. We're open to it. And then they don't get stuck into only being a one product, one service, or only a few products, few service type of company that comes from the top down. They're empowering their techs to actually make decisions. And what this helps with is embracing change. Now, as an owner, we're all usually pretty comfortable with embracing change. That's usually why we're the owner. But the biggest opportunity that Dominion sees for a lot of the other members is getting the employees on board when it comes to embracing change. So they said, you know, there are definitely challenges that come up, but the rewards have far outweighed the challenges that they've faced. So as you're looking at this and you're thinking about the next 4 years of your company, I want you to ask yourselves, you know, where does your company fall right now? You know, all the technology solutions that you're offering to your customers, you know, are these early adopter things? Are they in the early majority, late majority? Are they laggard technologies? Where's your company fall? So then I asked them, well, how come you do it despite all the challenges? And they're like, well, pretty nice growing 50% a year over the past 4 years. That works. But more importantly, with their customers, they said, you know, our customers have really fallen in love with us being at that point in the curve where we're an early adopter. Because even if things don't go 100% perfect all the time, they know they're getting the best stuff. And they know we're absolutely killing ourselves to be perfect. And that's what the customers fall in love with. That's the service that's exceptional that they can't get anywhere else. So think about where your company's at. Think about the technology solutions that you're offering, and ask yourself, you know, what would I have to start offering now to be in that early adopter position? So as we were closing the conversation, they said something else kind of interesting, which leads us into our next part of the presentation. They said, yeah, you know, it's so important for us to just communicate with our customers, and that's something we do really, really well. Because if we're not talking with our customer base, we know that someone else will be doing it very shortly. So this leads right into the sales decision that we have to make. Are we going to leverage our customer base, or are we going to continue to ignore it? Anybody ever feel like this? Where you have the gentleman here looking out saying, you know, the economy really sucks right now. Meanwhile, right under their nose, they've got this gold waiting for them in their customer base. This is extremely common. And I mean, we've talked about this tons and tons of times. And one of the first things that I do in the technician etiquette training that we teach is we talk about, from an ownership perspective, how much more expensive is it to go out and acquire a new customer versus keeping our existing ones and working our base. And according to a Harvard Business Review study, it's 6 times more expensive to go out and get new customers. And that's just kind of how we work as owners. We're looking towards the future. We're playing 4, 5, 6 years ahead. So we're always oriented toward the future anyway. But the point here is we have this like low-hanging fruit. We have this gold right under our noses. But it's not as flashy, and it's not as exciting as going out and generating new business. A lot of the times, that's why we've been successful. It's another one of those things where we have to shift our mindsets around it. So one member that we want to spotlight here that did a fantastic job is Hogan Technology. Here's a picture of Sean. And here's what Sean did. Over the past years, they have spent the past few years going 100% through their whole base, and they met with everyone in their base in person. This became the priority over all social media, email campaigns, drip campaigns, all the other things. They didn't, instead of trying to go to have a tremendous amount of breadth of different marketing solutions, they just met with everyone in their base in person. They offered voice, MSP services, hosted, and sold them all new stuff, primarily hosted. And here's some of the results. They have 4,000 seats of hosted with the recurring revenues associated with that. This isn't something that we haven't heard a million times over. We know that our base is important. But guess what happens? We just get caught into that cycle of going, oh, here, I'll get to it eventually. I know I got to do it. And we're not making the firm decision that, yes, this is going to be the sole priority. And just think about if in 3-4 years, if you had 4,000 additional seats of hosted and coming into your organization with the recurring revenues associated, you just think of what that could do. On a strategic level, what could you start thinking about implementing? What could be some new projects that you do? Just look at how that forms just like this strong foundation from which you can expand. And there's so many opportunities. And it's not through something complicated, and it's not through something that we haven't all heard like a million times before. We all know to do this. But these are some of the results that we can get if we actually follow through on these things that we know that we need to do. Which leads to the third decision, which is the financial one. Are we going to continue to wish for recurring revenue, or are we going to make our detailed plan? Every single member knows the value of recurring revenue. But how come some members have tons of it and others are just getting started? Well, there's this thing called Parkinson's Law. And what Parkinson's Law says is that work will expand to fill the time allotted for it. An example of this are meetings. Have you ever noticed that it's pretty interesting how we allocate 1 hour for a meeting, and then the meeting happens to finish magically within that 1 hour time frame? And when we set other meetings for half an hour, we end up getting those done in 30 minutes. And if we put that right before lunch, it's almost guaranteed to happen within 29 minutes and 59 seconds. The point here is however much time we allot to a task is how long that it'll eventually take. Years and years ago when I was in college, I remember the teacher would assign the paper that we had to do, and I'd have all semester to do it. 2 nights before, I would dust off the assignment. I'd have to find it again, and I'd go like, okay, now let's do it, and I would crank it out, and it would be down to like the last couple minutes, and that's when I'd finally pull it off. So what does all this have to do with our businesses? Well, guess what? Here's a timeline of some of the most powerful recessions that we've gone through. And one of the best ways for us to protect our organizations and recession-proof them is by bolstering our recurring revenues. So if you look at the timeline, if we go back 10 years from today, then we hit the Great Recession, where we got into the whole subprime mess. If we go back 9 years from that, then we hit the dot-com crash, where the dot-com bubble just burst. And we go back 13 years, then it's 1987, and there's Black Monday. What we all know, we all know the recession is coming, and we can't time exactly when, and that's not what we're doing here. But we see a 13-year gap, then we see a 9-year gap, and then we see a 10-year gap. Now, even if it's not right now, we know it's coming soon. And how many years have we said, you know what, well, I'm going to grow the recurring revenue. We need to do this. We know we need to do it. We're doing everything we can. But I just got some fires I need to put out right now. The member that we want to spotlight here that did a really good job of bringing this into the organization is VoiceSmart Networks. And on the road to becoming a managed technology services provider, Basically, the leadership were asking these 3 questions all the time in their heads when they were deciding what they were going to bring into the company. Okay, what are we selling on a monthly payment? What are we selling as a service? And what's the next revenue stream that we're adding instead of just the single deals? Now, what VoiceSmart did here was not only did they know that this was important and have that mindset the whole time, we actually broke it down, turned it into a plan, not a hope. And we allocated a budget to sell. You know, we had a number of workspace as a service deals, number of watch cards, number of MSP deals, number of Cloud Voice seats, all these different things. And we broke it down month by month so we could actually see, okay, this is what it's going to take. And we had the roadmap. As a tag member, you're entitled to customize plans. And if you want help with this, I mean, that's what we're here for. Email Tim, and then we can start working on a customized plan. You can email him at tim@tagnational.com. So not only did we have budget, we also did all the different sales and marketing things. We segmented our customer list. We did email campaigns. We did appointment setting, followed up on calendars to make sure that the meeting is actually happening. It was a full-on decision. It wasn't just like this random hope. It was a full-on plan. Some of the results that have been achieved through this, VoiceSmart has reached nirvana, which is that place that we affectionately refer to at where our monthly operating costs are 100% covered by recurring revenues. Imagine, even if it was 2, 3, 4, 5 years in the future, if your business was at this point, like what that would do for the quality of your organization, for its future. I mean, for your personal quality of life. Now, the fourth and final decision that we have to make is a management decision. Are we going to procrastinate, or are we going to hire and terminate employees that don't fit quickly? How many of us have heard this metaphor, where we got to get the right people on the bus, and then once we have the right people on, the right people off, then we can get them into the right seats? Well, if you've been at any tag training, tag events, or anything, I guarantee you've heard this message over and over and over again. And that's because it's not something new. This is all review. We all know this, but this is what happens when we execute. So I was talking with Brian, I said, which members do you think have been pretty exemplary here? And we found Brevol. And here's a shot of Paul Enlow from Brevol. And I said, okay, so how quickly are they able to make these decisions? And then they said, well, Paul was actually able to let an underperforming employee go after only 6 to 8 weeks of working at the company. And this isn't because Paul's like a cold person. He's actually very intelligent. But this is actually why he said they were able to make that decision. And he said, you know what? I won't let anyone stay longer than they need to. And his reason behind that, his mindset around this, was I'm not going to let an 80 or someone that's underperforming hold all my other talented people back. I'm not going to let one person slow down the rest of the team. Now, their hiring process, there's a little bit more, but just to give you a couple key points on how they're able to do this. The first thing that they're asking is really, really important. When I was talking to Paul, he said, culture comes first. We get multiple managers and leaders involved in our interview process, and everyone's basically asking this question first. Now, is this person Brevol material? Should they be on the bus? Not only do they do that, but they engage in all kinds of personality profiling. They do DISC tests. And what he did with this one particular employee was they ran the DISC test. It seemed like there was a fit. He engaged, Larry Chupp and Dale Stein as coaches. They made sure that they would check on the calendar. Then one of the things that they do that's pretty unique is that they have a scorecard with an accountability chart. And I'll show you a picture of that in a couple slides. But this is basically a scorecard where it's red or green. There are metrics, there are KPIs, there are key performance indicators for every different facet of the business, and it's green or red. And it's extremely transparent. And this is taken from the book called Traction, and he recommended to all the members to read the section on people. So this is what it looks like. This is what the scorecard looks like. And we all, a lot of times we have this already in our business and sales. Whereas, what's our target for, weekly or monthly number of sales? How many on-site appointments are we doing? How many recurring agreements are we generating? All kinds of different things. But this isn't just in sales. I have it in operations for open tickets that are in queue. They have it in finance for how many days are they waiting on accounts receivable on average. All different facets of their business. They have a target, and then you can see week over week whether it's red or whether it's green. Now, on these particular slides, don't worry about taking screenshots because we changed a lot of the exact markers and exact details to respect their confidentiality. So we changed some of the numbers, but just imagine you had this level of insight into your organization. Just imagine how much more of a sense of ease you would have. So I kept talking to Paul, and I was asking him, okay, so now that you've gone through this whole process, what did you learn? And he said, one of the things that I really took away from this experience was, for a long time, I was taking so much pride in employee tenure. Or to have 15-year, 20-year, 25-year employees. And I thought, that was just a sign of how strong of an organization that we had built. But a couple of years ago, ended up realizing that those were, not all, but some of the employees that had been around for a long time were actually the ones that were holding back the 20s. So that's when he made a pretty tough decision and actually decided to let go of half of his staff. And the reason he did that is so that the 20s could move forward. And I asked him, well, sounds like a lot of awkward conversations that you had to have. He said, well, actually, Zach, it's not. When we have this transparency and we have a scorecard and, employees come in and they see the metrics that they're being evaluated on, and it's completely transparent, it's actually not an awkward conversation. Because, they come in for week 5 of missing their numbers and not getting meetings and not doing what they need to do. It's like they know that it's just not a fit. It's not a surprise. It's not an awkward conversation because a lot of times they understand that it's not a fit. Now, this isn't a reason for us to just immediately be completely cold and calculating and eliminate the human element. I mean, Paul says, sometimes the reason an employee is underperforming is because they're not a fit, and a lot of the other times it's because we're not supporting them in the right way as a company. And we need to do more from a leadership perspective, and we need to support them. So we don't have to necessarily go all the way to this extent, but the underlying principle remains, which is the scorecard doesn't lie. So we've been talking about a lot of different things, but these are all things that I'm sure as as members, we've been thinking about all the time. Are we going to be an early adopter, or are we going to be a laggard when it comes to technology? Are we going to be one of those Me Too companies? Are we going to work our customer base, continue to ignore it, make a plan for recurring revenue, or continue to wish for it? Are we going to be quick about management, hiring and firing, or are we going to keep procrastinating? Well, we've been talking about this stuff for years, and the reason that we put this presentation together was so you could see what were some of the end results that other TAG members have been able to achieve by executing on these principles, which we all have heard a million times. And even if we didn't get all 4 of these done, if you imagine 2, 3, 4 years from now, if you could even get one of these down pat, if you made one of these decisions and really committed to it and really went for it, just imagine what that would do. Not only for you, but for all of your employees, for all of your customers, most importantly for your family. That brings us to the end of today's presentation. What I'd like to do now is I'm just going to call on a couple members and find out a little bit more. So let's start. CG, can you hear us? CG, you might be on mute if you're responding. Okay, let's go ahead and go to someone else. Here, Don. I'm curious, what are you taking away from today's presentation, Don?
It's reassuring because I've been an early adopter to many things, and there's always a little bit of hesitation in doing it, but it at least reaffirms that we're on the right path.
Great, great. Okay. What about you, Vic?
Takeaways for me are basically I'm taking a look at what we have lacked in the past in terms of going back to our base, and that's been a big issue for us. And yeah, you know, I can't really go back to the to a lot of the base right now with some products, but I can go back to them with other, and I got to go and develop a plan for that. And with regard to, you know, the idea of the scorecard, boy, that really gave me a lot of takeaway, and so now I'm going to try to implement that. I really like that.
Great. Glad to hear it. Looks like Brian Murphy jumped on. Brian, are you there? Okay, it looks like Brian's typing. There's probably something wrong with the audio. Let's go ahead and we'll round it out with one more. Okay, let's do Robert Brack. What are some of your takeaways, Robert? Okay, looks like a couple people are listening via PC. Okay, so that may be okay, let's see. In the chat box, I'm seeing CG Frank. He's responding. Biggest challenge is moving to a recurring revenue model is time required to maintain cash flow to support current operations and staff. No, Robert, we can't hear you. Maybe it's because you're on the PC. Okay, looks like might have some other comments coming into the chat box. Let me just read these, and then we'll wrap up. It looks like Robert and Tamara want to say something. Tamara is saying, can we get a copy of the scorecard? Yes, absolutely. And with every single one of these decisions, you know, not only can you get a copy of the scorecard, we can help work through all these different facets. You know, as TAG, we we kind of have that overview because I mean that's our role. So you can work with us on all these different aspects. I mean, if I were in your shoes right now, I would be asking myself, okay, what's the first one that's the most important decision for me to make? And then engage TAG and say, okay, this is what I want to do. How can you help me? And take advantage of all the resources and talents that you have at your disposal. Okay, Robert Bragg says, biggest takeaways are using the scorecard to trim staff and pay attention to our base. Thank you, Robert. Jerry says this validates some of the actions we're in the middle of now. Currently ready to hire 2 new salespeople this week to mine our Toshiba base. That's great. Yeah. So then we'll go ahead. Let's go ahead and wrap it up. I'm really glad to hear that these are reaffirming a lot of decisions. Yes, this shouldn't be anything new. If you've been in TAG for a while, these should all be review things. But I just wanted to really showcase, how powerful it is when we implement on some of these key areas. And I'm very glad to hear that a lot of us are already on the right track. So we were budgeted for 1 hour for today's talk, but it looks like we're done about 15 minutes early. Thank you so much to everybody that made it to today's talk. I know your time is incredibly valuable, and I hope that this is worth your 45 minutes. Any other last comments or questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Totally worth it.
Thank you so much, Kim.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.